Hello, this is Kathleen McKee of Oleens.com, Machine Embroidery Art.
In previous lessons, I talked about how all the tools that you would be needing to hand or manually digitize something would be under your little heart and star shapes tab here, and you would have all your closed path tools and all your open path tools. I want to talk about the manual punch tool now. And back before PE Design 10, it's probably about the only tool the tool I use most often, because it was the only way I could get complete control of my stitch direction. But now with PE Design 10, that you can add the direction lines is not as important as it used to be, but it's still important to know how to use this tool. You have a straight block tool, and notice it says shortcut Z. And then you have the curved block tool, and that's the shortcut X. And then the running shortcut V. Forget about this V thing. It's just a glorified jump stitch. I don't even know what it does. But whenever I start a manual punch, I always start off with a running stitch. So let's click on that. The reason why I do this is when I send out a runner before I start my manual punch, and so the machine has the time to throw down some stitches to catch the thread before it starts sewing out a satin, for instance, because it might unravel. So when I start my running stitch and I put down my next point, that's going to be my top. And I'm going to use the straight. And now you can go, because when you select it, it automatically takes you to the manual punch, and I could click on this straight block tool, but I'm going to use the shortcut Z as in zebra on my keyboard. Whenever I use the manual punch, I always have my left hand on the keyboard so I can toggle between the V, the X, and the Z. So that when I lay down, that would be my top, and when I push the Z, you see the icon changes to the straight block icon. The next stitch will be my bottom, and then be my top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom. And even though I'm going upside down, I still want to keep my place by saying top, bottom. So I know when I'm doing something, like if I select it and I go to sewing attributes and I want to feather the edge, I want to know which is the top and which is the bottom. What I love most about the manual punch is this running or connecting shortcut V, because if you are tracing around and you want to make a fine like satin stitch outline around something, you can switch between a straight block, and then by pushing the key in the X and say I need to go to another section, I can send out my running stitch and then begin my manual punch again without it ever stopping or jumping or trimming the thread. Let me give an example of that. I'm going to bring in this image from a file, and with my finger on the shift key, let's get it bigger, a little bit bigger. Okay. So I'm going to send out a running stitch, and then that's going to be my top. When I click down, the first time I click, that's the top. When I push the Z on my keyboard or go up to this manual punch tab and go to straight, it's going to turn that icon into a straight block tool. So I'm going to put my bottom there, my top, and the bottom. Now I can press on the letter V on my keyboard or go back to the running stitch there, but I'm going to go to the V, and then there's my first click, that's my top, and then I push the Z, that's my straight block again. There's my bottom, top, bottom. When I get to this point, I want to push the letter X, and that turns my icon into the curve block. So we will continue top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom, bottom. You see, now I'm upside down, but I'm still saying top bottom so I can keep my place. And believe me, if you do enough of these, you'll understand why you have to say that to yourself in your head. And top, bottom, double click. So now you have your stitches running nice and smooth. And another good thing about PE Design 10, which you could not do in Next, is you now have the ability to add an outline around it. So that's a really big improvement for PE Design 10, and I still use my manual punch more often than any other tool, and as you get better at digitizing and see all the things that it can do, I think that you will be using it as often too.